Hello, my name is Jennifer Burch and I'm a doctoral student at Aspen University. I'm going to be discussing a dissertation that I've been working with for the past several weeks for my Introduction to the Dissertation course, which is RSH 912. Today is March 16th, and this will satisfy the benchmark assignment for this course. The dissertation I have chosen is written by Tracy Skinner from Old Dominion University and published in 2009. The title of her dissertation is The Exploration of Barriers and Solutions for Women in the Pathway to the High School Principalship. At the time, women represented 44% of all public school principals in the U.S., but only 26% of high school principalships. The purpose of Dr. Skinner's study was to discover what pathways women take to achieve the high school principalship. The study seeks to identify ways to overcome any barriers that might occur along the pathway and provides inspiration to women who aspire to be a high school principal. It is important to understand the reasons there are fewer females in the U.S. principalship and to help address equity in this issue. Dr. Skinner chose three research questions to study. What pathways to the high school principalship do women follow was research question number one. Number two, what barriers do women face on their pathway to the high school principalship? And number three, how do women entering the high school principalship overcome barriers to the profession? Again, there is not equity in the profession between men and women. While women make up the majority of teachers, they do not have a majority of the principalship or even an equal number of principalships. The method that the researcher used was to contact public schools around her area where she lived and get in touch with several principals and assistant principals. Ultimately, she used a non-experimental qualitative design, which is naturalistic inquiry through an in-depth interview of the female principals and inspiring principals. She contacted them by email and then by phone if they did not respond to the initial email. Before she did that, she contacted the administration of each school and each school district for permission. She used purposeful sampling to identify only female assistant principals and principals. The females falling within all females falling within this category were contacted, and an equal number of principals and assistant principals were contacted. She collected demographic information regarding the participants, including their race, age, the current position held, education, degrees held, years in the current role, and other leadership roles they had held, as well as the years of teaching and the subject that they taught, and their family makeup. Then in-depth interviews were used with an adaptive interview guide for principals and assistant principals and 4 reflective journal prompts. The interviews were conducted over the summer months and recorded on a digital voice recorder, with a voice tape recorder for backup. A professional transcriptionist was hired to transcribe the interviews word for word into Microsoft Word, and a reflective journal prompts were also kept in Microsoft Word. This helped with accuracy and neutral reporting of the interviews. Not all participants completed their reflective journals, and that was one weakness of the study. But the researcher did disclose a personal relationship with an evaluating principal that was one participant. The transcripts and the reflective journal prompts were saved in the Microsoft Word and coded using the software. Emerging themes such as the history, familial support, mentoring, networking, career aspirations, and solutions were coded. The researcher chose not to use any issues surrounding race and age at this time. The researcher then had the codes evaluated by a second person and from the university that kind of helped her make sure that she was on the right path for her study. The results of the study showed that there were some negative stereotypes that precede women who are trying to enter the field of the high school principalship. The purpose of this study was to expose those barriers and to highlight the successful pathways that female high school principals had. The women interviewed, they wanted women to realize that the hours are long and stress levels are high. Of the 6 principals interviewed, none had children at home. Of the assistant principals, all had children and had not yet moved into the principalship because they were worried about the time beyond the traditional 40-hour work week in addition to the instructional day. The significant themes that the researcher found were that there were specific pathways and that women struggled getting on that pathway and having continued difficulty to advance to the highest level of career administration. Their career paths have a tendency to be delayed by childbearing. The principals varied with regard to classroom time. Their years of classroom experience ranged from 5 to 20 years. In fact, one of the youngest principals had younger children and told the oldest female had spent 20 years in the classroom, had no children. Another theme that they found was family, and they needed family support in order to be successful on this pathway. They discussed the importance, each principal discussed the importance of having family before career, and then also having family support of their career. Mentoring was another theme that emerged from the interviews. Two of the principals mentioned being formally placed with a veteran female high school principal as a mentor, but others felt like they struggled to find a mentor. Specific leadership academies were also mentioned as a pathway to becoming a principal. This is where school districts sometimes feel like they need to grow your own administration within their district. The principals viewed themselves as mentors to others, and they stayed within feminist theory, which was the critical feminist theory used as the theoretical perspective to develop a sense of connectedness between women. Networking was also an important issue. Now, there were some limitations to this study. Dr. Skinner only used 12 respondents. He did a lot of work with interviews and spent a lot of time transcribing and studying the data and the transcripts of the interviews, but I almost feel like there's not quite enough information there and would have expanded that if there was any possible way. The limitations that she acknowledges was that she did know one of the interviewees. One of the respondents was her evaluating principal, which means was the principal that went into her classroom and determined whether she kept her job or not. The researcher perfectly selected these interviewees because they met the criteria needed and they responded to the email. She wanted to avoid biases in the future and suggested that you maybe not make those prejudgments. There were also no men involved, so there was no male perspective, and it might have been interesting to have seen the comparison and contrasting of the perspectives between male and female principals. Also, perhaps interviewing school board members who had to make a decision between a male or a female and to see what if that you could find someone who could honestly answer those questions. There needs to be more research in this area. I plan to use this information to replicate the study in some way in my own state of Oklahoma and work to make sure that I expand the samples and that I work with people that I do not have any personal relationships with. Overall, this was a good and well written dissertation with its weaknesses. There were a few issues with some grammar and some transitions, but it was not poorly done at all, and I enjoyed reading it. Thank you very much.